Ecuador's president warns Britain Julian Assange must be charged or set free. Plus, another step towards peace in Colombia. The UN agrees to oversee the end of the conflict. This is From the South. Thanks for joining us for teleSUR English. I'm Cody Weddle. Someone needs to pay for Julian Assange's ordeal of 3.5 years trapped inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Now, that's the message from Ecuador's government to the British authorities. The WikiLeaks founder must be charged or freed, according to President Rafael Correa of Ecuador. Both he and his foreign minister told teleSUR in Quito that Ecuador deserves to be compensated for the situation created by Britain and Sweden.
Someone needs to explain. Someone needs to respond for the 3.5 years that Mr. Assange has been unfairly deprived of his liberty in the Ecuadorian embassy because things were not done when they should have been.
Social movements in Argentina are still camping out in front of the state government in Jujuy to demand the release of one of their leaders. Now, they've been there for 37 days protesting against cuts in funding for cooperatives. It was this protest that led to the arrest of Milagros Sala, described as the first political prisoner of Mauricio Macri's presidency there.
She has to be released immediately. None of their policies have any legitimacy as long as one of our colleagues, like Milagros Sala, is held in prison. We told the governor that this would actually strengthen law and order in his state, and he agreed to look at our request.
Argentina has declared a 1-year national emergency to tackle the threat posed by drug trafficking and some other organized crimes there. Now, the measure allows the armed forces to shoot down drug planes if they refuse to respond to warnings. And it also strengthens border controls. And now our correspondent there in Argentina, Laureano Ponce, joins us live from the capital, Buenos Aires. Laureano, thanks for joining us. Being described here as an extreme measure, perhaps, by the president, Mauricio Macri. What else can you tell us about this new measure there in Argentina?
Well, hello to you, Cody, and the audience. Well, yes, this is an emergency state in security, in homeland security, that has been declared by the government. It was declared, in fact, a few days after the new government came to power by December 10, and it was declared by the Security Minister, Patricia Burrich. Today, Mauricio Macri announced he would issue a decree stating this state of emergency, for which among many other things, as you were saying, this allows the military to interfere in domestic safety issues. This is a very important topic because this is forbidden by Argentina's domestic homeland security legislation that bans the defense forces, such as the army and others, to interfere in domestic affairs of safety, public safety. This is only allowed for federal forces such as the federal police or provincial police corpses. This also means that the security minister will be able to purchase security equipment and guns and many other types of equipment without no need for public licitation or a public call. So this is also triggering several questions. Human rights movements and activists organizations are also criticizing the measure because they say that this figure of drug trafficking or terrorism that is also included in the decree allows political activism to be pursued as a crime, since the borders between terrorism and political activism, according to an anti-terrorist legislation passed here in Argentina a few years ago, are very thin. So this is already triggering several critics by left-wing sectors, by opposite sectors, and anyway, the decree is not issued yet, but it's also one of the things that many social movements, and human rights activists are pointing out right now.
All right, Laureano Ponce there reporting from Buenos Aires. Laureano, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Protests against fare increases have ended in violent confrontations really in Brazil. Now, the demonstrations there continued into the early hours of the morning in the center there of Sao Paulo. The clashes broke out when the local state's military police used tear gas and stun grenades to try to disperse thousands of protesters in front of the Republic metro station. Sao Paulo residents have been protesting against the fare increases since the beginning of the year. Meanwhile, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, he has set up a National Economic Council. He did that on Tuesday night to address the country's economic difficulties. The new body brings together representatives of communities, trade unions, and private business. He said the country needs to join forces to protect social spending and boost production. The opposition-controlled parliament in Caracas is now discussing Maduro's economic proposals.
Venezuela ha entrado en una verdadera emergencia económica.
Venezuela has entered into a real economic emergency, a crisis that threatens the social stability and the social achievements of equality and justice that we have built in the last 10-15 years, and which seriously threaten the political stability and integrity of our country.
Y que amenaza gravemente la propia estabilidad política y la integridad del...
The Venezuelan government has also been stressing the importance of communes and other grassroots organizations in regenerating the economy. teleSUR has been talking to campesinos involved in a coffee production project backed by the state telephone company.
The popular power laws are a tool that helps us to organize, and through grassroots organization, we can boost our agricultural production.
It's about how you can feel that you're governing your own country. That is people's power.
With all these projects from the state telephone company and others, we can strengthen the economy, so we don't have to depend just on oil, but on our own production, on coffee and many other crops.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has welcomed Tuesday's decision by the FARC and the Colombian government to ask the UN to oversee a final ceasefire in Colombia. Now, the mission set up by the Security Council would include observers from the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, or CELAC. It would be part of a tripartite mechanism to monitor a definitive end to the 50-year conflict. Now we turn to Bogota now for more on that story. We turn to our correspondent Natalia Margarita there in the capital of Colombia, Bogota. Natalia, the UN has agreed to back the ceasefire mechanism. Are people optimistic about this latest announcement there in Colombia?
Yes, Cody. In fact, expectations are running high here, not just because this latest announcement is considered as an important step towards peace itself, but also because it's an important step specifically towards a bilateral ceasefire, which is something that in the wake of a series of unilateral ceasefires that the FARC has been implementing since the peace process started more than 3 years ago, social organizations have been persistently calling the government to agree to a bilateral ceasefire. So this latest mechanism of verification and monitoring of an eventual bilateral ceasefire is indeed being considered here in Colombia by social organizations as a step further towards that direction of the bilateral ceasefire. Now, it is important to remember that today it's been 6 months since the FARC implemented its latest unilateral ceasefire. So expectations are running high as people believe that this latest announcement will very likely constitute a step closer to the very much expected bilateral ceasefire, Cody.
All right, Natalia Margarita there reporting in Bogota. Natalia, thanks so much.
Back to you.
Moving on, the next presidential elections here in Latin America, they will take place in Peru, but many voters there say they are not convinced by any of the leading candidates. Our correspondent in Lima now, Raul Mora, reports.
Elections have been launched and leading candidates are trying to brand themselves as politically centrist or center-left. For instance, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski claims to be a socialist and progressive, even though he has been a lobbyist and officer of major multinational corporations.
I'm progressive. Peru has a lot of poor people. There are many people without drinking water. Who can oppose social progress? Nobody.
However, the actual proposals being offered by the main candidates continue with the right-wing economic and political policies that have reigned the country for the past 26 years. Polls show that a great deal of voters do not support any of these candidates.
I'm not convinced. They all say the same, and we should no longer believe them. I don't even know who to vote for.
No, none of them, because they always say the same thing. They promise things, but nothing changes. Everything continues to be the same.
It is always the same proposals, and they never fulfill their promises. That is why I'm not convinced.
The few candidates who propose alternatives to the established system are not well known.
For those who want to offer proposals or alternatives to what the country has, it is much more difficult. And that explains why new parties have little success. Because there is no space due to the political system that puts up barriers, or because the owners of large media businesses are in bed with the main candidates.
Elections will take place on the 10th of April. Since polls showed that no candidate will receive a majority of the vote, a second round will likely take place with the two leading candidates. The next president of Peru will assume office on July 28th. Rael Mora, teleSUR, Peru.
Greek sailors and farmers have begun a wave of protests against a pension reform planned by the government of leftist Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. Now, the sailors shut down ports in a 48-hour strike while farmers are massing their tractors along national highways, threatening a blockade. Now, farmers also handed out their produce for free outside the labor ministry. Greek unions have announced a general strike that's set for February 4th. German and Turkish police say they have dealt a major blow to the organized trafficking of migrants. More than 490 officers conducted coordinated raids across German cities and arrested 5 suspects. Similar raids took place in Turkey, where 30 arrests were made. A suicide bomb attack killed at least 7 employees of a popular Afghan TV channel, just months after the Taliban declared it a legitimate military target. Now, the attack took place in Kabul, near the National Parliament. Israel plans to declare over 150 hectares of farmland in the occupied West Bank as state land. Now, this would be the largest seizure since 2014. The land is in the fertile Jordan Valley, close to Jericho, an area where Israel already has many settlement farms. In Syria, the second phase of the formation of self-defense brigades is near completion. Now, the brigades, they're mainly groups of civilians who are trained to defend their areas with support from the state. The groups consist of state employees from various sectors there. The volunteers conduct military exercises along with fire and rescue operations.
We trained here in urban warfare and to resist military incursions. We are here to support the Syrian army.
Just 10 days to go until the first run of primaries and caucuses begin in the United States. Who will be the next president there? And the candidates there, they're spending some huge sums to showcase their campaigns in the media. Bianca Perez, now our correspondent in the U.S., reports.
Daily, millions of citizens in the United States are bombarded with public announcements about aspiring presidential candidates. In the last 10 months, 100,000 campaign ads have been shown in 1,500 primetime shows in 48 states.
In cable news, for example, it's largely based on hate. That is, Fox News Channel's message is that Republicans need to hate Democrats, and MSNBC's message is that Democrats need to hate Republicans. And this extinguishes the possibility of meaningful dialogue between people. It imprisons voters.
The hypothesis that this election will be the most expensive in the history of the U.S. is thus far very likely. Less than 2 weeks away from the Iowa caucus, over $100 million have been spent on publicity, and the campaign is only at the beginning.
I think that with the way things are at the beginning of this year, it is highly feasible that this will be the most expensive campaign in the history of the United States. It will be difficult to put a final amount on this because that number will depend on how the campaign will evolve, especially for the Republicans, with the amount of candidates they currently have.
If the election occurred today, the winner would likely be the candidate with the most media exposure and who has the most wealth. Donald Trump has raced to the top in all polls, mostly due to the media's criticism of his incendiary comments, which have granted him more on-air time.
This has helped candidates who have said crazy things. There has been no fact-checking from journalists, and I think it hurts not only the people, but public discourse.
This exposure based on criticism has pushed aside the true debate of policy proposals between the candidates.
You're paying attention to one thing because that's what they're telling you to pay attention to. That's what they want you to be outraged with, because all the other sneaky things that they're doing behind your back, you're not going to know.
In the 2012 elections, $1 billion were spent on the transmission of 100 campaign commercials in key states. Bianca Perez, teleSUR, Washington, D.C.
And that's what we're covering on this Wednesday, January the 20th. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to join us on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For teleSUR English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll see you back here tomorrow.